When all is said and done, what will you say? Will you say that you shifted expectations or the ground shifted beneath your feet?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to the Shift PanelCast. It's been quite a while since we've done one of these, actually been 9 months. We went into lockdown. We did our last panelcast with Bernard Foley and Jimmy from the Aqua Rugby. And then we pretty much shut down panelcast for a few months. I went bike riding a lot. I think CT went for lots of walks. We got the business in order and we're back. So thanks very much for joining us. Today we are going to have a chat with Tim Watsford. Tim is the CEO of NT Major Events. He is a fascinating guy. Became CEO at a very young age. He was a senior executive over at the NRL. He's had a fascinating career, really insightful, and it was really lovely to hear how passionate he was, not only about his own career, but about developing and helping other people in the industry and ensuring that there's a really good communication across the tourism industry and marketing and sports and events. Enjoy episode 19 with Tim Watsford. Okay, thank you so much, Tim, for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you on, and it's so great to actually be back recording Panelcast. We took about an 8-month hiatus, and we're really pleased to have you back on as our first guest. And we've also got CT, who is my business partner and MD of the Shift. So we will just start straight up with our general icebreaker question. What is your favorite event that you have worked at or attended of all time?
Yeah, good question. Being in the industry for a while, there's probably a few that I can draw on. But from a short, sharp response, having worked on Base in the Grass here in the top end, has to be an event that I'm going to hold dear for forever. But also from a spectator perspective, attending a Giants game in New Jersey over in New York.
Nice.
The way they do it over there, and I was a salute to service rounds, pretty special. They're an amazing sport and doing some amazing things. And one day potentially could be racing over there in the United States, hopefully. But they're definitely my two all-time favourites.
Oh, can you tell me a bit more about the first one? Sorry, I didn't.
Base in the Grass. Base in the Grass is a music festival that we do here at the top end. It was derived 20 years ago to the year. We're celebrating our 21st birthday in 2023. But I guess why I hold that one as a really special event to me personally is when I arrived in 2018, it was very much considered a community event, an event to service, Territorians more broadly. So it was in a little place called the Darwin Amphitheatre, beautiful part of the Botanical Gardens here in Darwin, that serviced around 5,000 or 6,000 people annually, did its job. Noting that events in May, when the rest of Australia is usually drizzly and a little bit wet, and those music fans are deprived of some live entertainment. One of the first, I guess, strategic moves that I kind of pressed on with was to go, righto, well, this is in a great time of year. Artists want to play, no threat of weather. Let's go and advertise this to a much more of a national audience. Happy to say within 3 years, that event in 2021 ticked over 14,500 people at a location down on Mindle Beach. And in 2022, which is a couple of months away from now, we'll hit 16,000 people. And we're competing then with Splendour and Falls Festivals and Groove in the Moose and the ones that are on that national circuit. We're there, which is great, and it's good to be there.
I want to come.
That's
could be the next on my agenda one.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you pulling a lot of people out of Queensland? Generally there, Tim, or are you finding people coming out of New South Wales and Victoria and South Australia?
Question. Good question. Research, particularly from a footy perspective. So if you hold an AFL or an NRL game, here usually a big draw out of Queensland. But Base in the Grass is a funny one. There's a really good spread from right across the country. WA in 2021 had its challenges with the border controls, but from an eastern seaboard perspective, it's a really even spread. So people just want to get out and dance, and watching watching
when they're allowed to dance.
When they're allowed to dance, and I think managing to get that event away in, was, I guess, considered quite the height of the pandemic in May 2021, just before Sydney went into lockdown.
Yeah.
It was quite an achievement. And out of that 14,500, happy to say, north of 8,000 people from outside the territory, which is
amazing.
our prerogative here at major events in the Northern Territory, and that's what we hang our hat on. And it's good to see everyone really enjoy themselves in what is hopefully going to be one of our signature events going forward.
Awesome, well done.
And CT, do you want to jump in of an event?
Favorite events, or you know what? I mean, I've said this. I've probably said a bunch of different things on here, quite a lot across all the different segments. But something that I have as a really fond memory is an event I attended in Spain. When we were looking to bring Red Bull Air Race out to Australia in the around 2007. Was a round of the Red Bull Air Race in Barcelona. It's the first time that I'd seen the air race in real life. Something we were looking to bring to Australia, and just seeing this site in such an amazingly passionate city as well. But with 1 million spectators around the city was gridlocked. People just got out of their cars and looked up in the sky and watched this event. And it was really something like I've never seen ever before. It definitely gave us a fire to bring it back to Australia and put it on here for the first time for sure. So it's a really fond memory.
Yeah, awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, amazing.
Tim, back to you. Can you just tell us a bit about your career?
I think I've been lucky enough to be blessed with some pretty good moves and some really interesting work in my 17 or 18 years, I guess, in the professional workforce. I guess I started out working with the Sydney Cricket and Sports Ground Trust. They're in Paddington in Sydney and operating the two venues in Allianz and the SCG. I guess my upbringing, I should say, from a school and university perspective was very sport related. Love it, breathe it, can't get enough of it. What better way to kind of get a bit of a taste of everything than working for a venue? So I was lucky enough coming out of uni to jump into a spot there, relatively junior in a service or a venue service role, but loved it. It was awesome. Great people, great industry. Knew that's kind of where I'm going to sit and where I want to work, which kind of led to the desire to footy, I guess, for want of a better word. Played union at school, have a really strong passion for rugby league. So from there, knowing, I guess, it's quite a vivid memory, knowing what I wanted to do, in particular working for the trust, seeing codes come through week in, week out. But I want to try and see what we can do over in rugby. To be honest, it was the Waratahs at the time. They were based at Moore Park and still are. But I was then lucky enough to take a role in, I guess, ticketing and memberships really early, and shifted into event management and operations within a couple of months at the ARU, where I spent Australian Rugby Union, now Rugby AU, where I spent the better part of 8 years, I think it was. I guess from learning the ropes, climbing the event management ladder, everything from, I guess you guys know, early starts and late finishes, to effectively leading a really good team. Once again, people is probably part of me. So we really developed a really solid group of bodies, and we did some amazing stuff. And that culminated in the 2013 British and Irish Lions Tour, which I think anyone that's a rugby fan can't wait for that tour to roll around every 12 years. So lucky enough to lead that as a project, which was very, very rewarding. Great revenue from a business perspective, great atmosphere from an in-stadia perspective, and just a good 5 weeks to be in the country, to be honest. So that was a lot of fun. Following that, probably needed to diversify a little bit. So John Nicol at the time, who was head of commercial at the ARU, brought me under his wing to really look at government partnerships and more broader sponsorships. But the solace was around how do events deliver an economic impact for states and territories, and then how do we leverage that as a sport. So we went on our merry way, and I spent probably the better part of 2 years working on a couple of projects. Probably the biggest one there was the Sydney Sevens, if everyone remembers that, moving that from Gold Coast to Sydney. I wasn't there for the eventuation of it, but that was kind of the area they were playing in, and I kind of got a taste around, wow, there's, from a sports perspective, absolutely there's a revenue, and there's a product that people want to travel for in footy. then my shoulder tap to come across and apply my trade to NRL, and NRL at the time was led by a variety of different heads. They were no longer there by the time I joined, believe it or not. So the conversation started at the time I joined at the start of 2015. There was no one there, but I guess that gave me the room to look at what the NRL wanted, where I can apply my trade, both from an event management perspective, the commercial I've learned, and also some hospitality and corporate experiences. And then had a great time. Had 3 years there doing a whole bunch of stuff. Like we led the whole major event operational component, led corporate hospitality, led effectively the government partnerships, all the relationships with the destination agencies, and some real big ticket items that I'm proud to lay claim to, as the Magic Round in Brisbane we worked on, moving Origins to Adelaide and Perth and Melbourne. And for those that know rugby league, that was quite a challenge, just from a stakeholder based perspective in particular, moving footy away, or major events away from heartlands, being in New South Wales and Queensland. But I think that probably culminated, and when you asked that original question around what was my favourite event, that kind of finished up in 2017 with the NRL Grand Final, and using Macklemore as our spokesman for a variety of values. But then I guess following that spot, had no real desire to leave. 6 months later, I'm sitting here in the Northern Territory running an amazing little company that generates economic impact for the Territory across a really, really broad portfolio, and have managed to really turn this little business that we all hold dear for the guys outside my door at the moment, into, I guess, a family. And I guess you have to be in kind of a remote part of the country. But that's me in a snapshot. Have loved every minute. Really blessed with kind of my career to date.
I'm just listening to you, kind of blown away. I mean, you just went straight into a major governing body, and then worked your way through different codes, and ended up as the CEO of Major Events Northern Territory, which is incredible.
It sounds like your journey intertwined with the sport and tourism, and it's culminated in you being, what I mean, like bringing everything to Northern Territory now. It was this journey of bringing those two things together, two passions, and being able to, put the business case together and be able to, have a real direct economic impact in those areas.
You're right. And I think if I really cast my mind back, that role at the ARU, when we kind of said, there's actually some real economic benefit that fall out of these events, and footy was pretty trivial at the time in this space. So seeing that as a gap, I guess you could say, in market to leverage and carve a career out. Next thing you know, I'm sitting here running an organisation on the other side of the fence on behalf of government. So look, you're dead right, and I think the emphasis that events can do to tourism, as seen as a converter. So if I've always wanted to come to the Territory, but I've never actually got to the point of booking that ticket, hopefully, Base in the Grass or Supercars or Parchment that we do in the Red Centre are that ticket to go, you know what, I'm going, and I'm going to go to the event, and then I'm going to go spend a week on and have a good time from a tourism perspective. It's underrated, and I'll sing that from the rooftops because I live and breathe it. But events are a massive converter of tourism opportunities, and it's pure and simple. We've seen it in spades up here at the moment.
Yeah, and it's great. You go, Haley.
Then we are seeing more support from the government on that, and I will definitely go into a bit more about what Northern Territory Major Events does. But just going back to your career, it has been such a vast and quick career. I mean, you're pretty young to be a CEO. What's been like the highlight of your career so far?
Probably has to be the CEO role, I think, and being here. And I say that more broadly, but leadership, it's hard to teach. And like I said, I was a pretty young executive at NRL, and I loved it. And I love the people I worked for. Andrew Abdo, now CEO, was my direct line manager, and worked really closely with Todd Greenberg at the time. Amazing, and I love the sport. But coming here for I guess A, to test myself, but B, to kind of lead a group of people and look after their well-being and their direction, and we shape people's lives as executive leaders and CEOs, and to have some feedback come through from staff, whether it be quarterly surveys or just general feedback that they're happy and they enjoy coming to work and they love what they do, and we all know events is a pretty tough industry from time to time, especially when you're dealing with a toilet supplier, as an example. And there's some pretty ordinary situations we get ourselves into. But for them to want to do that and want to come and be a part of it, there's no other feeling like it. It's amazing from a real technical or tangible perspective. I can't walk away. A career highlight being that Macklemore piece that I've spoken about before. There's some real tangible outcomes that we did at NRL for people.
Could you expand on that for us on the Macklemore?
Well,
a lot of people wouldn't. I mean, some people might not know about that.
No, it was a no, they might. It was an amazing show. First and foremost, he's a brilliant operator. But I guess what we wanted to achieve in 2017, I'm getting my date years mixed up, but it was 2017, was to produce a show that aligned to the NRL's values, in particular inclusiveness, around that time. And I remember quite vividly, Ian Roberts, a very openly gay footballer, had a discussion with Todd, our former CEO, and my direct line manager Andrew at the time, just around youth suicide in the space around openly gay people and kind of how can NRL play a part, I guess, for want of a better word, to celebrate our uniqueness and our inclusiveness. And we'll given with the opportunity to acquire Macklemore for that grand final of that year, which for those that don't remember was almost the exact time that we were voting for equality, for marriage equality. So the yes vote, I guess it was kind of named back then. So we had this opportunity to use Macklemore, who sings a song called "Same Love" that is an anthem, I guess, for want of a better word, and use our profile and our eyeballs. There's, for those that don't watch too much rugby league, there's between 4 and 4.5 million eyeballs that watch that grand final year in, year out, and we wanted to use our voice to advertise, and Macklemore nailed it. And I think, and I've mentioned this to people before, I remember getting home very, very late at night, or early in the morning, and watching the replay as I usually would from an event, saying, what have we done? And I sat there and quite honestly had a glass of scotch, winding down, and I've actually events change lives, and I think we managed to do that. Now I think we used our platform to help shape what is now the ability for openly gay people to get married in the country, and that's whether that was actually tangible or not, probably is redundant, but we did play a part in getting a message out. So that was really special, and I think we've used our platform for the good, which is sometimes hard to do. And NRL does get a bad rap from time to time, and I think the roots of that sport in particular is inclusiveness. Yeah, and we played our part in doing a really good thing in 2017.
Yeah, that is incredible. I love that story. And it's so nice to see such a big code, such a big event get behind being a platform for change. A lot of our clients that we work with, it's now mandatory for us to include 2 UN Sustainable Development Goals within our events. All our clients are completely on board with it, but no one's going to make a change unless we start that conversation. And we've got this incredible platform to make those changes in the world, whether it's environmentally or socially. So that is such a great example. Do you have any other examples that you've seen, maybe that you weren't even involved with, that you have seen around the world and thought that's an incredible way to use an event to change opinions?
I think, and it's probably not doing what you're doing within an event. Absolutely, there's probably a dozen examples, but a really interesting one that I'm watching unfold now is in the Ukraine, I guess, Russian crisis, and looking at sports or major events, using their platform to not, I guess, go ahead and F1, which is a monster, and it's a huge generator from economic outcome in Sochi there in Russia, but. F1 got up early and got out in front of it and said, we're not racing there this year. Now that is not effectively changing through the event, but using its voice and a stamp to play a little part in what is a pretty horrendous situation over there. And the fact that, our trade can, and our industry can do that is pretty awesome. I'm not saying
we've got such a huge voice that we need to use it more. All right. Or just,
it's definitely lending some weight, isn't it? Yeah,
it is, mate. And I think, I don't think you see the end of it. poor Ukrainians that are going through what they're going through at the moment. I don't think it's over yet, and we're seeing all the sports come on, whether it's a statement in support of Olympics or F1 or whatever that might be. They're all in support of this is not okay, guys. So let's use our voice to advertise that.
Yeah, well, I guess another example is Mardi Gras, which is about to kick off and take over Sydney, and it's come from a long way back, and it's doing amazing things, and it's incredible to see the city, a whole city getting behind something that's started out so small, and even I guess it's had to go through its COVID changes at the moment, but it's amazing to see a whole city getting behind that event too.
That's one of
my
events.
And it's getting bigger and bigger, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's so much fun. I love going to the city and just feeling that vibe, and it's so good.
And it opens a lot of it's a platform for those conversations, and for people to talk to their kids about it, and for make it
All right, Tim, back to you again. I keep diverting. What made you move to the Northern Territory? When you were approached, what made you go, yep, this is the right job for me?
Yeah, really good question. Sometimes I ask myself that. That's no joke. No, I've got a beautiful little girl who was 3 at the time, now 7. Love my wife to bits. We didn't want change as such. I think I wanted to completely test myself from an environment that is remotely unfamiliar, both from a living perspective, but also from a stakeholder base. I don't mind a challenge. I like to operate in some form of a crisis, so to speak, or chaos, for want of a better word. So I'll be honest, it took a little while to come around to the idea to move to the Territory following that grand final experience in 2017. But in the end, I guess the lure of going to a place that I didn't have a stakeholder base. I know what they wanted to achieve as a board. My board that I work with here are amazing and accomplished group of people. Seeing what they wanted to achieve and having a vision was pretty enticing. But then from a family perspective, getting out of, I'm not going to say the rat race because I love Sydney and always will. I was brought up in Manly, but I can be home in 10 minutes here, and I can spend more time with my family and little daughter. Like that's a big part of me now, and wherever I go to next in my journey along life, that's always going to remain. And the Territory's given that to me. It's been a long 4 years, don't get me wrong. COVID in the middle of it's been quite challenging, being cut off from family and friends from right across the country, but it's also solidified relationships within the Territory that you wouldn't experience anywhere in the world. And we are a family here, and our network as a friendship perspective, I won't experience that everywhere. Or if I move or if I stay, we won't experience kind of what we've got here. They are family, and COVID solidified that. But in short, I think it was, let's give this a crack. Let's really test myself. I had no idea. I'll be honest. I've been to Darwin once for a Potter Sevens tournament many years ago. Can't say I liked the place then. Love the place now.
I mean, it must have been quite difficult because you wouldn't have had a huge network there. You've not been a CEO before. You hadn't worked with any of these people before. Was there any one person or any few people that kind of convinced you that this was the right thing?
Yeah, there was. I've got a really great mentor, and I'm going to say friend first. In Andrew Hopper, happy to say his name loud and proud. We worked together at ARU. He was one that kind of got me into the events at the very start many years ago.
Yep.
And he wasn't there for long while I was there, but we obviously stayed in contact. He had moved to the Territory a little while before I had, and said this could be a role for you to have a look at. And that was effectively it. That obviously opened up discussions to our board. So it moved away from that kind of personal relationship to much more of a transactional or technical discussion with the board. The board have got a really good focus on culture and wellbeing, which I advocate for quite prominently. So when we started to get into that kind of level of detail with the board, I thought this is the role for me straight away. But look, that one friend, I guess, was really important in my transition to come here. He's now in Queensland, but from that perspective, the people you meet beyond kind of that immediate friend that give you support, and if you're doing a good job, they'll back you from 100 out, and that stakeholder network here has really supported us on and off the field, I'll say. And you meet some amazing people. I've got a great friend that farms crocodiles for quite some exclusive suppliers in Hermès and Louis Vuitton that I've learned a lot about from my better half. But there's like stories like that, and hearing what they do is that for their days to day. You don't get that in Sydney or anywhere. Like that's
you're a real crocodile hunter.
A real life crocodile hunter.
But I think Tim, maybe in some ways, it's almost more important for you initially to have had amazing contacts in every other part of the country to be able to, in that role, to be able to bring things to the territory, be able to bring people to the territory from a tourism point of view.
Yeah, that's a really valid point. Territory is quite transient, and it's a transient population. We get that. It's a big regional city, really. So the fact of I guess from a workforce perspective, getting talent, keeping talent has always been a challenge. And when I arrived, it was still to that extent. Like I'm really happy to say we've got some really strong leadership team now that we've managed to acquire from right across the country and into the ditch and across the ditch in New Zealand. And they're applying their trade now. And the more ideas and fresh eyes and come into the business, the better the results are. So mate, to your point, we've got an amazing operator that heads up our marketing department here, and she is absolutely smashing it from a tourism and economic perspective, and getting our message out exactly what we want to see and seeing the conversion. So that's a really good point. And acquiring talent, keeping them is probably one of the hardest parts. But we've been lucky enough to do that, particularly over the last couple of years, which has been quite challenging.
Yeah, that's great. And I guess the more you grow it there from that. The more it grows, the more you can grow your local community and local industry and bring that through as well. So you're kind of adding into there with all of the major experience and events that are coming your way. Yeah.
There's a role that we play. Our structure's a funny one, but we are owned by government first and foremost. Our role is to support industry, to be leaders in this space, to be the front door for the industry, I guess, for want of a better word. So you're right. The more that we can develop the industry outside the building, the better. I'm not saying we're going to make this business redundant, but there's definitely a desire to bring more events and more event managers and create jobs and create a lifestyle for people to call the territory home. That's an absolute prerogative, and that's kind of where we're going to shift as part of our strategy more so. Absolutely.
Right.
That's a really good segue into sort of giving us a bit more of an overview about Northern Territory major events and everything that you do, because when you first started it was a pretty small company, even though it's a government agency.
Yeah, we are. So for listeners, I guess it's a hard one to explain, and sometimes it does get confusing. But we are a government. We are owned by government. We operate under the Corporations Act, so my board is effectively independent, as any company would effectively run. However, we are a funding arm of government, so we're connected to a department, and our core objectives are to deliver on what the government wants, mainly visitation, livability, economic outcomes, etc. So, in its truest sense, we started as a company 22 years ago to deliver a supercars event, which everyone knows and holds dear on the supercars calendar. As an event management organisation, government went out and got a sanction fee to say, hey, we've got this race, or we got to go and get someone to deliver it, and then the company was formed. From that perspective, we've gone much more larger in terms of pure event management and holding risk on events, I'll call it. We are funded a little bit by government, but we've got to obviously make our revenue through ticket sales, sponsorship, all the normal ways that events kind of generate their bucks. But of late, we've also shifted much more into that grant funding and industry support piece as well. So we actually fund basically every community event right across the territory, year in, year out. We do 2 funding rounds, and that comes out of this business as well. So, and that achieves objectives much more of a holistic event calendar. Darwin and Alice Springs are very seasonal, I guess I'll say. So dry season in Darwin and obviously the cooler areas in Alice and Tennant and Catherine is between May and September, which is when everyone wants to do their stuff. So it's very cluttered. Our job's to really spread out and try and attract a visitor audience from right across the year. So with that grant funding program, we support events to undertake their operations in different times of the year, and we managed to do that. And from a pure turnover perspective, for those that know kind of their way around the balance sheet, we've doubled in turnover in 4 years kind of under my tenure, which is an amazing testament to not me, but the company. So, everything's getting bigger. That example from Base in the Grass earlier on in the year is probably the best example I can give to those that kind of want to go, well, where were you and where are you? Base in the Grass at 5,000 or 6,000. Now we're at 16,000, and everyone enjoying it and competing with the likes of Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney, Adelaide, Perth. Our population from Darwin in particular is the size of Bondi Local Council. There you go. So that's kind of where we are and punching above our weight.
Amazing.
Cool. I was just sorry, I just got sidetracked. I was just Googling when Base in the Grass is on, but I have an event that week, so I'll have to add that for another one. So mentorship seems to be quite a strong theme in your career. You've mentioned quite a few people from the beginning of your career, and you seem to have, I suppose, kept those relationships going throughout. Is it something that you just naturally attract, or is it something that you go out and seek? And do you also pass that on to sort of the younger generation of event professionals coming up?
Yeah, I think so. From my perspective and my mentors, I guess, they're good people first and foremost. I think, and that's, I guess, I've naturally been attracted to good humans and ones that effectively will deliver their craft. So hardworking, detail orientated, objective driven, I guess, for want of a better word, is who I've gravitated to. So I've mentioned a couple. There's probably been a handful more that have helped me along the way. Is there a dedicated website that I've gone to and looked up a mentor? No, but definitely, if I needed advice, I've got a really, really strong network to ask for it. I'll probably say that's a strength. I'm really thirsty for knowledge and keen to grow in any role on and off the field. So I've got Andrew, which I mentioned. I've got some guys that run the high performance programs from the AFL teams in particular. From a leadership point, I really respect how strong league clubs and AFL clubs continue to win. Melbourne, Richmond, those kind of mentalities. So I've got a thirst and naturally kind of head on into those directions. But from a leadership perspective or providing advice to my staff and friends or employees, absolutely. I'm always at the other end of the phone, and I can't say that someone rings me religiously, but there's probably once a week that we get a call just to have a yarn from people that I've crossed upon my journey. And the funny thing is that they're not really from the territory. I've got my guys here that I'll naturally lead and apply personal development to, but there's people from right across the country now, and I think that stems back to the work we did in particular with the NRL more broadly across the country, but and the ARU. Have a chat, keep going. So that's I love that. That's awesome. And LinkedIn is a tool now that I think everyone uses from a professional perspective in our industry better than ever at the moment.
Oh,
so,
it's fantastic. In the last couple of years, I've definitely used that a lot, and they've even got a mentorship program on there actually, which is a bit more, I suppose, on a professional level. But I think in our industry, especially, mentoring, whether it's a formal way or informal, is so important. And when you see someone that's got that thing, you just want to help them along, right? And I'm appreciative of people that I've known for years and years in my career, or people that I've literally just met in the last few months. And
I think that's an important part. I know events are amazing, don't get me wrong. If you don't work in the industry, I think some people not throw Exodus, but say, "Oh, you guys do the sexy stuff." You get to meet Macklemore, or you get to run a music festival.
They clearly have not been in event management for very long.
No. And then they said, "Oh, well, here's our problem with the facilities. Is we're not pouring beer cold enough, and toilets aren't working." There's a lot of stuff that kind of falls out the back. But to your point, if you see someone that's got it, I'll break my back to help them, and that's kind of how I've grown as well. So I'm very grateful to kind of those that have influenced my career today.
Yeah. And CT was, I mean, you still are, was my mentor for years and years before we became business partners. So I was very lucky. He ended up agreeing.
I don't know I don't know what to say. I'm like blushing. Can I ask you before you move on there? I'm just thinking about and something that I find exciting about what about the Northern Territory. And this is probably going away from the traditional, major sports and major established organisations or whatnot that are coming into the area. But Northern Territory has, this unique, rich culture, which is very unique to the space, and it's exciting to see events like, and you're going to have to correct me if I'm saying it wrong, Pachima, Festival of Light. How do you say it?
Pachima.
I think we came across it with the Australian Event Awards, which we did very well with last year.
Yes.
And,
yes.
It's exciting, and it's great to see, that rich culture being brought to the forefront. And I guess from an events tourism point of view, like that has got to be something that is definitely a draw card for you guys up there.
Absolutely, 100%. And I think where we went on our strategic journey, our previous strategic plan finished in 2020. So when we kind of relooked at what we want to go after over the next little part as a board, the uniqueness of the territory is one of our biggest assets to sell, to get people here.
Yeah.
And I say that because money that governments are pumping in on the eastern seaboard into tourism and events is astronomical. Like I said to you before, we can't compete on funding alone. We can't hold a Melbourne Cup or an F1, or it's just physically impossible. So where we need to play in is our uniqueness and Indigenous culture. First and foremost, we have that in spades, and I'll say, till they put me in the ground, the Territory is the richest place for experiencing culture firsthand than anywhere, I'm going to say, on the planet. And like I grew up in mainly Northern Beaches in Sydney, and wasn't exposed to nearly enough that I should have been through my life. But coming here and experiencing what we do and what we hold dear is amazing, and that's celebrated through that event in Pachima, a festival in light. So I guess for those that don't know, it effectively is putting art, Indigenous art, from right across the Central Desert region up in light or into installations. And those that know Vivid Sydney, it's probably the biggest ever in Sydney. They're the creators of that, are also our producing partners in that event as well. So it's a really highly technical way of advertising Indigenous culture through light and installations, and going through even the process. And I'll share a little bit. Going through the process of getting to the event is absolutely surreal. We've got 4 or 5 traditional owners from the Central Desert region that will form the Pachima reference group. So we need to make sure that everything that is done is culturally sound, and they guide us. And it's watching the discussions around the reasoning and the whys and the stories come out through the event planning process is amazing. Between us and listeners, I'd love to work out a way to kind of advertise that, because it's second to none. So you kind of sit there and go, wow. So when it comes to the 10-night show in Alice Springs, and we're lighting up 2.5 k's of the West McDonald Ranges, which are effectively, a kilometre high, it sits you back, and it's not football in terms of my career, and it's not a music festival, and it's not a supercar. It's something that is truly, truly, truly unique to the world, and that's what we need to focus on. And I think coming out of COVID, Indigenous tourism in particular is very well advertised. That's a conversion point, and we'll be aiming all our guns at those from a marketing sense, and with our friends in NT Tourism, to make sure that that's advertised to every corner of the planet, because that is an event that's got extraordinary growth. And our biggest issue there is basically accommodation. Can we fit everyone that's going to come? And from a growth perspective, it's COVID hasn't slowed down. Like, it's literally increasing by 5 or 6 million in economic impact year in, year out. And that we've managed to live with that event through the past couple of years, and it's still growing. So you can imagine when we're back to normal, it's going to be a free for all. So we're excited, and that's what we hold really dear.
That's a great problem to have. Yeah.
It's a great problem to have, and I think secondarily, to apply that Indigenous culture now to mainstream sport, this year is going to be the first year of the Supercars Indigenous round that we're hosting in Darwin as an exclusive round. So teams are on board, owners are on board. You'll see some amazing stuff come through broadcast, but also up here in the top end in Darwin as well. And that's where we need to play, and you'll see that fall out a lot more over the next couple of years from our company.
Yeah, fantastic.
You mentioned Tourism Northern Territory. How do you guys work with them? Is it
we're a company completely independent. We're funded through NT Tourism, but Andrew, who I mentioned before, effectively him and I share the same theory around events drive conversion from a tourism perspective.
Yep.
So the design of getting us together was to bring events and tourism a lot closer, and they have, just by naturally Andrew and I working off the same dance card, so to speak. So they're effectively a department inside of government here in the Northern Territory, a bit like Sydney, and we work intricately with them around providing, I guess, our portfolio for tourism to market and get out and deliver on what we achieve. We're a part of their strategy; they're a part of ours. We're intricately linked. So, and there's a real rock solid desire from our board to grow that economic stimulus through visitation. So naturally, we're going to have to work together. And I guess prior to me arriving, maybe prior to Andrew arriving many years ago, that wasn't the case. It was quite isolated. Events do community stuff, tourism does tourism stuff. Now we're much
which
more.
doesn't make sense, in the scheme of things. So it's incredible that's been able to be changed, and it's obviously making such an incredible impact.
Yeah, it is. And I think from a stakeholder perspective, whether it's the regional tourism officers or effectively our state tourism officers here in Darwin and in Alice Springs, they're starting to shift their planning and strategy towards, hang on, actually events do move the dial. So it's and watching that come to fruition is good enough in itself. Travel packages selling off the shelves by the truckload as well is great. 4 or 5 years ago that wasn't the case. So it's all starting to move in the right direction. And I'm not going to say keep up with the rest of the country and the world, because we've always effectively done it. We've just now gone, we're advertising the benefit for what events do much more than we've probably previously done.
Yep. Now that leads me well into the next question was, where do you see the sports, entertainment, events, marketing industry in the next 5 years?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Coming out of a pretty challenging couple of years. Probably what I've learnt. I'll start with what I've learnt over the last couple of years is people want live events. People need to interact. That we're social by nature. Cooping people up more broadly. Yes, there's some people that like to stay home. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes I'm one of them. But I think people want to get out. So I think from an industry events perspective, I feel there's always going to be growth. There's going to be a rebound. To be quite frank, I thought it was going to come in droves at the start of this year, and Omicron got in the way of that. But it's coming. But in saying that, I'm also going to probably shoot myself in the foot here a little bit. The digital revolution is also pushing pretty hard as well, where people are consuming content, whether it be sports or entertainment or arts through their devices. So there's definitely a shift in that way. And when we're working at NRL around the digital transformation 4 or 5 years ago, the thought process was, wow, how do we keep people inside a stadium as opposed to just looking at on their phone? I'm a big advocate. That's always going to be the case. People want to cheer for their team, or people want to go to an event, or want to have a cold beer, or that's never going to go away, because I think that's our fundamental DNA, is to socialise and be amongst others. But in the next 5 years, absolutely, digital is going to be well and truly advanced. I think we all know that. But it's not going to be at the detriment of going through a turnstile and having hopefully a good pie, a cold beer.
No, I mean, not at all. I totally agree with you. I find technology fascinating and where we're going with technology. But you need events to create that content. So
absolutely.
It's not ever going to get in the way of a live event. It's actually just going to enhance it and mean that your reach will be larger.
I agree. And what can we do, to our point before? Maybe our problem in Parchment, which I mentioned before, is around we've got potentially nowhere to house these travellers that are coming. How does then digital play its part to broadcast that to the world through devices? So it's a hard one to answer, where we're going to be in 5 years, but I'm definitely going to say there's going to be a real within that 5 years, push for everyone to get out. And we're kind of seeing it already, aren't we? With nightclubs being queued up for miles in Sydney and Melbourne, and people coming up here. We're looking to have probably our strongest tourism season in probably 5 or 6 years, based on all things going to plan here in the territory. So that's looking good. But I think the future's bright, I guess, is a very vanilla way to answer that question.
Yeah. And look, we're not going to hold you to it. We won't call you ideas. But yeah, it's just interesting to hear different people's perspectives and what everyone's thinking about coming out of COVID, or whether we are coming out of COVID, or we're just ignoring it now. We're probably the busiest that we've been in the last couple of weeks, which is really good. So, well, sorry, we're like getting to nearly into the hour. We do 2 standard questions generally with our panelists. So I've got the second to last question for you is, any suggestions on a great productivity tool? Anything that you use to keep you sort of successful or on track?
I'll probably use the term leadership probably can be a lonely place sometimes. Phrases, take the bullets and all that kind of gear. So you're really the figurehead for the business, for the good and the bad. Don't get me wrong. The results that come through are very pleasing, and watching, as I mentioned before, people really enjoy what they do is amazing. But I guess to keep me sane, and I've used this in particular over the last two years, is mindfulness, first and foremost. And I picked that up through those performance coaches, which we touched on a little bit earlier, through the AFL scene in particular, around areas that, how can I just unplug from, I guess, the day to day? It does get quite challenging, and working within an environment that is a smaller environment. You might have to have a tough negotiation with someone, but then go to dinner with them the next night in the territory. That's kind of how it is. Or if you give someone bad news, they'll report that to a senior bureaucrat or a minister, and the next thing you know, it's all over. So you've got to be really delicate. But in what's really helped me is to take a small amount of time, and I've used the apps, and I've kind of done everything, to be honest, because I've chased this really down the rabbit hole. But simple as walking the dog on the beach and just listening to surf and disconnecting, I think is an amazing tool that keeps me fresh. Ability to sleep. I had some sleeping troubles when I worked at the NRL and into this as well, but from a physical perspective, it's been second to none. And I'll preach that to a lot of people. We've developed actually a very dynamic wellness program here at NTMEC only over the last 4 or 5 months. We saw a lot of our staff, as I mentioned, being transient and from somewhere else. A lot of people are from overseas, and we were able to apply our trade where Eastern Seaboard states potentially weren't over the last couple of years. So we could deliver an event and feed the beast a little bit from our career. That was sometimes the detriment of people not being able to get back to the UK to see their families and whatnot. So we saw that, and as a leadership team, we advertised that, and we heard it. And now we've developed a pretty unique wellness program that we've actually pushed tools. Mindfulness is one of many, but we've pushed tools that are sent bi-monthly for the team to use at their disposal, just to keep them fresh. And that's everything from a podcast to a mindfulness exercise, whatever that might be. We're kind of learning as we go. It's quite a dynamic program, but that stemmed from what keeps, I guess, myself fresh and seeing it work with me, to now applying that to the group. So that's probably a really key one that I can't stress enough. You get that right, and it doesn't have to be. I think Ed, so I'm harping on a little bit, but Ed, who supports us in this area, said it can be as simple as stand up in the shower and literally unplug, don't think, and let the water run in your head for 10 minutes, and even that, like, it's not your mind's not continually going, which mine
That's
tends
where you
to
come
be.
up with your best ideas in the shower in the morning.
Now I don't. I literally just listen to water, and so, but that keeps me fresh. I think you look after the mind as much as the body, so to speak.
Yeah, I totally agree there. Being able to switch off is definitely something that needs to be worked on more, especially people in senior leadership positions.
And advertise that to your staff and your employees and the people under your mandate as well. And I think even simple things, and I make sure I'm out of here by 5:30 at the latest. I might go home and do some work at home if that tickles my fancy that night. But I think from a from an optics perspective, it's important to lead by example. So that's one area that I try to make sure that go home, meet people. If you have to do a little bit more, you have to, but where possible, we try not to. But yeah, mindfulness definitely keeps me sharp.
Agreed. All right, last question. What event are you looking forward to attending next?
I'm going to say base in the grass again, 100%. I can't wait. Like it's watching that, but probably because that's a part of me. And if you spoke to anyone on my team, it's a bit of a pet favourite. Parchment actually stands my hairs up. Don't get me wrong, but watching base go from where it was physically. So I arrived in 2018 and we're delivering for 5,000 people and one stage, and I'm not going to say beeline artists, but artists that weren't where they are now, to where it is watching 16,000 people dance on the beach. It's a bit of a claim to fame personally. So I can't wait till May. It's going to be another amazing experience.
May the 21st.
May the 21st, 12 hours, midday to midnight. It's going to be a corker. Can't wait.
Awesome.
Nice.
What about you, CT?
I'm coming up for Karchma. Whether it's this year or next year, I'm 100%. I'm so impressed and inspired to come up there and have a look at that. It looks incredible. But I'm also an F1 nut, so I'm pretty excited about F1 in Melbourne going off this year. So it's long overdue.
It is long overdue. I'm kind of with you on that. That clashes with Pachima, but if it wasn't, I would stay there next year.
All right, Tim, well, it was so lovely to meet you, and thank you so much. That was a great conversation. And
great. Thank you for having me, and happy to share my thoughts with anyone that comes across your path. And if anyone's in the territory, look me up. Let's have a cold beer, see a crocodile, and maybe dance in the drive.
Sounds good. Pleasure to meet you, and thanks so much.
Good on you guys. Thank you.
Cheers, Tim.
All right. Thank you for listening to episode 19 with Tim Watsford. That was a really insightful chat. I love Tim's passion. It was so good to hear that events are going so well up in the Northern Territory. If you would like to follow us on Facebook, please check out the Shift PanelCast group. Select to join and we'll accept you there. Also, please sign up to our PanelCast emails, which are the-shift.agency/panelcast. All right, thanks so much. Hopefully it won't be so long between panelcasts. See you next time.
When all is said and done, what will you say? Will you say that you shifted expectations or the ground shifted beneath your feet?